Bienvenido. My name is Josh Halpern. I'm coming to you straight from the United States of America. We are talking about how do you optimize your inventory and management and fulfillment to enter the U.S. market from, in particular, Brazil and to some degree, Latin America. We're giving a shout out down there for the e-commerce forum. This is a partnership with the GrowBig initiative and the U.S. Department of Commerce Commercial Service out there in Brazil. We're here now with Vince Iacopella from Los Angeles, talking about all the aspects of market entry and logistics here. So Vince, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Josh. Great to be here.
What do you do? What have you spent the last 35 plus years doing? And what does Alba Wheels Up do?
Alba Wheels Up is a supply chain management company, United States based middle market company. We are a customs broker, a freight forwarder, a non-vessel operating common carrier. We do end-to-end supply chain backed on a tech-based platform. We drive value to U.S. sellers of product, importers, exporters, and U.S. resellers of e-commerce here in the United States and globally.
And so to put it in a nutshell, whenever I have a company from overseas that wants to sell into the U.S. and wants to figure out the best way to do it from a fulfillment standpoint, from a taxes and duty standpoint, I go to Vince. And even U.S. companies that want to source from overseas and bring it in go to Vince. So Vince is awesome. So we're going to find that out right now with all things with the old model. Tell us, what have people been doing all this time before you showed up?
For the last 200 years? Yeah. So thanks, Josh. So basically, we call this a legacy model, or the pre-e-commerce direct-to-consumer explosion model. This is a duty-paid entry that a U.S. Customs broker is licensed to do by Homeland Security and Department of Treasury. A shipment comes in, we manage the shipment, we file entry, we file trade and security data, we pay duty as a customs broker, and we get a release. By far, you mentioned something, by far the majority of our importers who are our customers are here in the United States. They're U.S. companies, they're resident importers. A portion of those importers are non-resident importers. They are importers that are not in the United States. We act as customs broker also for those companies in a legal, compliant way.
So what you're saying, first and foremost, is the traditional model, this is still very active today, is to bring product all the way in wholesale large volumes and distribute.
Right.
And in that case, you do not have to be, you don't have to set up any entities in the United States to do that. You can work through a broker like yourselves, an agent essentially, and do that as a non-resident at the entire time.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. So I want to be careful with that and be really clear when we talk about what we need to set up and what we don't need to set up. A lot of times a foreign country thinks they have to have a corporation incorporated in a state in the United States to be an importer. You do not. Filed and registered with U.S. Customs as a non-resident importer with a U.S. Customs assigned number, and you can import without being here, as long as you have given a power of attorney to a U.S. licensed customs broker. And there is a portion of our business which is managed that way. It is a very big model in China. It's a very big model in consumer goods from China, but it can work from anywhere. And basically, we ship products into the U.S. ports, just like we've traditionally done. We handle all aspects of the customs clearance, the duties, the taxes, the customs trade filings, the customs security filings. We get cargo release. We deliver to a fulfillment center, and we fulfill orders as sold. We can do all those things. We can do all those things without the importer of record having a legal company in the United States. They just have to designate who the ultimate consignee is and hire a licensed customs broker. And this is what I call the traditional model, the duty paid model, the 0-1 consumption entry model, where I pay duties or not. I file an entry, a formal entry on bulk. A lot of it goes into a distribution center. In the old model, most of that went to a distributor, to brick and mortar, to retailers. A portion went direct to consumer, and you could do whatever you want with the goods once they're in fulfillment.
Okay, So that is what people are doing now. A lot of you out there probably have heard of this because this is the way people do business. A lot of your offices and your departments in logistics probably are taking care of this. But let's get fancy here. Where do you place inventory and how to fulfill your U.S. orders while reducing your tax and duties?
In 2016, we had a law change in the United States that on something called the de minimis, which is the maximum amount of value a consumer can bring in under their name into the United States per consumer per day. It went from $200 to $800. That was 2016. On top of that, you look at the purchasing habits of the U.S. consumer, even pre-pandemic, that were pivoting to doing more online market purchasing for themselves from their phone, from their tablet, from their computer. Then on top of that, you put pandemic spending where everybody is home, and you take all these things together, right? You take the change in the law allowing more value of $800. You take everybody stuck at home and the huge shift to direct to consumer or online buying, and you have a perfect storm of increase in types of goods entering the country under this de minimis or Section 321 duty-free option for direct-to-consumer goods or e-commerce sales.
Okay, so put it succinctly, basically a lot more people buying stuff online, a lot of small packages, small parcels, the rising de minimis, which means de minimis is essentially the threshold before you have to pay taxes. So anything under $800 going into the United States, you don't have to pay taxes on.
As long as it's eligible, and most things are eligible now. As of 2 years ago, Food and Drug Administration products are eligible with more data. So yes, anything under $800. And the other gap that we should address at this point is that what makes it under $800, the ability of the U.S. seller or the marketplace or the foreign seller or whomever to identify the U.S. consumer. Because when I identify Josh Halpern, I'm going to connect the goods coming in that belong to Josh, and they're going to be under $800. Under the old model, they would have been in a 20 or 40-foot container. They would have been in bulk. They would have gone to distribution, and they would not have been sold to Josh Halpern until they were in U.S. fulfillment, right? So for the de minimis to work, you have to identify a U.S. consumer purchaser that purchased under $800. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
The other thing we noticed, like at the very beginning of the pandemic, was that the distribution channel of the product became part of the product, right? So a product that was selling online versus a product that was still in brick and mortar in the pandemic, the same product at a very different value, very different pricing, right? So two things happened. The delivery method becomes part of the product, not separate from the product. And now what you're seeing is starting with the end in mind. So a large U.S. brand may say, wow, 25% of our sales are direct to consumer and the other 75% are still brick and mortar. Why don't we not move that 25% into the U.S. until we can identify those U.S. consumers, right? And that's when we start getting into these more complex models where goods are going to Mexico or goods are staying outside of the U.S. until a consumer is identified.
So Vince, when you're talking about this de minimis and this 25% of your product going into the U.S., if you know already who the end consumers are, there's a ways to place inventory outside and then come in only upon purchase because of this whole 3-2-1 entry system. What does this mean, 3-2-1?
Yeah, let's just do a high level, right? The Section 3-2-1 entry. It is a little bit about what we talked about before. It allows for duty-free importations up to $800. It's called the de minimis in the U.S. It's called the de minimis all over the world. Every country has one. So it's $800 per person per day. Depending on whether the ultimate purchaser's identity is known at the time the goods depart from overseas and arrive, that's when Alba and others can trigger this type of entry. So when we're looking at these maps, the map that Josh is in love with, Some of those the consignee, and some of those you don't, and that's what we're going to talk about. What you can do when you can identify the consignee, and what you can do when you cannot identify the consignee.
Okay, can we talk about this slide? Because this is the master of all slides confusing. I love it.
Yeah, this is a summary of the services that we offer. You will see an air service, which is the more 1990 Section 321 express consignment courier service. This is because when that plane lands in the United States, when that plane takes off at origin, each U.S. consumer has to be manifested and known. And back in the day, that was the only thing that made sense. It still does, because when somebody buys something online or they buy something e-commerce, they want it quickly. And if it's sitting in Brazil, China, or Colombia, or the United Kingdom, until you can identify a U.S. consumer, you got to fly it over.
Here we got air. So if you're coming in air, this is one model.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the traditional model. This is the model we grew up on. This was the 90s model. Maybe it's the QVC model too, right? When somebody would buy something off the television. So this is the model that, hey, the reason I'm flying this in small packages, not mentioning any brands, but the reason I'm flying this in small packages is because I got to get it there quickly, and it had to wait at origin until I can tell the manifest who the U.S. consumer was. So when you look at this, what's different about this? Do I need to know the buyer before it ships? I do. That's why it's sitting at origin. If I provide a harmonized number, will it clear much more quickly today? Yes, because of a project called Entry Type 86. Can I clear goods that require participating government agencies like FDA, Food and Drug Administration? As of a year and a half ago, I can. Before that, I could not. And does each purchase have to be under $800 per day? And the answer is always yes.
Okay, next one. Ocean USA, this big boat. I take the cruises, but this is like a shipping boat here. What is this model?
I'll call this one the impossible model. This is a model that we built for a large fundraising company that has products going to about 5% of the U.S. population, right? And they know the consumer about a year in advance, right? Which is very much the black swan unicorn of this, right? They know the consumer 1 year in advance. So they can actually identify the consumer prior to departure in the ocean model. Other people that are doing this are subscription services, made to order, bespoke services, but it is not the norm where you can identify a consumer at origin and take all that time by boat.
Yeah, so let me just call that out for people who are just watching right for the first time and just dipping into this. So the idea is, because they know the consumer, that package, that individual package sitting on that big boat with millions of other packages, has a label on it already, I presume, of the end consumer, and can be declared in customs right out of origin as this is going to this person, and therefore it can take as long as it really needs to get there because the person's not waiting there.
This also gives birth to the next model, right?
All right, let's bring it. Ocean Hybrid USA to Mexico.
There you go. So now I'm saying, wait a minute. I don't want to leave all this in Brazil. I want it really close to the U.S. consumer. But if I clear customs in Long Beach or Los Angeles or Miami, I have to pay duties and taxes, right? How do I? What do we do? Well, what's being done very heavily in Los Angeles is it comes into Long Beach. It goes inbound to a northern Baja facility in Mexico. It goes into what's called an IMEX for up to 18 months, and it stays there until a U.S. consumer is identified, and then it crosses into the United States. Because now I can I'm still not entering the commerce of the U.S. until I identify the consumer, but I also don't have goods halfway around the world waiting. So, and what I meant about starting with the end in mind is that we had some customers start this program because they didn't want to pay duty, right? And then they turned around and said, "Wow, we really like this. We like that the goods are so close to the consumer. We like that, we can go into the U.S. direct to consumer, or we can go into the U.S. In bulk to brick and mortar and just pay duty if we like." Right? Say we could split it up, but we have that versatility until the sale is made. And let me just open this blue box again. Do I have to clear the shipment when it arrives in the U.S.? I do not. I do not have to make clearance when it arrives in the U.S. Well, I have to pay duties when it arrives. I do not. I do not, because I'm not entering it into the commerce. Can I hold the goods in Mexico and ship as the products sell? Absolutely, that's the model. And again, we kind of added this on every one so everybody would get it. Of course, it's $800 per consumer per day.
Okay, so again, we're talking about you can move your inventory in bulk close to the market. And this is not just Mexico to the U.S. In a lot of places, this is the idea: move it close to the market. But then at that place, you could decide, hey, I already know the end consumer now. Trigger the shipment. A couple of days in, it's being delivered, but it's under the 800 de minimis. I'm not paying duties and taxes on that. But then you say, hey, I got orders. They're coming at me big. I got to deliver on a distribution model. I'm going to bring wholesale in. Fine, that you pay that, but it's already there anyway. So you have those two options, right? Great. Great. And you're saving money from doing the air version of this because you've got the boat bringing it in.
That was always a prohibitor, right? Like, I don't want to pay for air freight. I'll just pay the duty. I'm paying it all in air freight. I'll just bring it in by boat and pay duty.
Ocean hybrid Mexico to U.S. What is this? Everything's green.
This is funny. We actually built this for China to Mexico, thinking we would never use it. And then with the shape the LA and Long Beach ports were in last summer, lo and behold, a lot of customers said, we want to go directly into Ensenada. The reason why we have you coming through the canal from Brazil up the west coast of Mexico into Ensenada is because that's where most of the IMEXs are for consumer goods. An IMEX is the Mexican acronym for the bonded warehouse facility, right? So that's why we have you coming up the west coast of Mexico, because that's where the bonded facilities are. There are some in Texas, but the trip from Manzanillo or Veracruz all the way up until Tijuana is not doable economically and for other reasons. So that's why we have you coming up into Ensenada. So you can go from Ensenada directly into IMEX. We prefer the Long Beach model, but this is out there for people who, for whatever reason, want to go direct Brazil to Mexico, near shore in Mexico, and then get into the U.S. market.
How long does it take Ensenada to, let's say, Chicago and Seattle, et cetera? How are we talking New York, and versus Tijuana versus, let's say, Miami? You've got those three places. If you're coming from Brazil, you're like, okay, I got Miami, I got Ensenada.
And you got to remember, when you go into Ensenada from anywhere, the carrier selection is going to be a lot less than LA Long Beach. The frequency and capacity will be less. So that's why I think it's kind of like a very, we offer it, but it's not as heavily used. And then don't forget, you're going into Ensenada to go into the warehouse facility. The containers from LA Long Beach get into the Mexican facilities faster than the ones that go through Ensenada. We could open up the blue box if we like.
Yeah, let's do a blue box. Let's blue box it.
So this is kind of useful. Are my goods subject to Mexican entry requirements? They're not, because they're going into the IMEX. Can I ship the whole truckload to the U.S. as long as all the buyers are individually named? Yes, if they're individually named, you can do that. Is each shipment subject to import duties, if any? No, not in Mexico and not in the U.S. And is every purchaser under $800? Yes. So that's always going to be there.
Okay, that's great. Can we talk about here the Miami option and why You don't have that there?
We haven't tested Miami. You'd still have to move the container up Florida by land over the Gulf, and then you'd have to cross in Laredo. And there are consumer goods moving north and south in Laredo, but mostly industrial goods in and out of Mexico and the U.S. Not a lot of energy, a lot of manufacturing. So you almost would have to bring the container by land all the way to San Diego again.
Now, there's some assumptions that you assume that we understand that I'm going to nail down here. So if I'm Brazilian and I talk to a lot of Brazilian companies around market entry, and they say, great, we're shipping it to Miami, and then we'll take it. Yeah, you can do that. And yes, it is close if you're shipping in. But as we're saying, that doesn't allow you to bypass that 321, the de minimis and duties and taxes, right? So you've got to, right? The idea is to station it outside of the U.S. So once you hit Miami, you're in the U.S. So outside the U.S. and then fulfill.
And that Josh, that's what we mean by start with the end in mind, right? So if in other words, if you're going to do a duty paid conventional entry, by all means, go to Miami. If you're going to fly a Section 321 and you're going to file section when it lands because you know the consumer, by all means, go to Miami. But if you want to hold the goods outside of the U.S. until you identify a consumer, do not go to Miami.
Okay, and another thing that people don't realize, I would say, well, but there's free trade zones in Miami. I don't understand. I'll just put it there and then pull it out of the free trade zone the moment the U.S. consumer buys it. But this doesn't apply for that, right? Which I didn't know either.
There is a huge debate going on in the country right now, a feverish debate, obviously led by the Foreign Trade Zone Consortium, that there is a law right now. I'm not phrasing it 100%, maybe legalese, but the gist of the law is that you cannot make a withdrawal from a foreign trade zone direct to consumer 321. They have to be they have to be formal withdrawals. There is a lot of talk about changing that, and that would, of course, cause a flood of goods into foreign trade zones. And some can make the argument that it logically could be changed. But presently, going into a U.S. foreign trade zone does not allow you to go direct to consumer on the withdrawal.
Okay, so everyone got that. So right now, that's not an option. So
people don't get it, but I love this option because if you are shipping, if you have the luxury and the fortune of identifying U.S. consumers under $800 in an ocean container, I like the Canada because we go into Canada, we transload that container in bond into a truck, and we cross into the U.S. off truck manifest, which is very efficient. And you also have the versatility of not having to deal with a direct U.S. ocean importation, even if you know the consumer. So this has been going on for 10 years, 9 years. This is not a new model. Some of the larger brands have been doing this for a long time.
You've got a bulk product you can go slow down to in a boat, but you still don't know the end consumer, and then it hits Canada. You keep it in Canada until you know the end consumer, correct?
No, this is a little different. This is a little different than that. This is like, I do know the consumer, but I'm going through Canada because I have a more streamlined data flow, and I want to transload in Canada into truck, and I can drop it into last mile right away. So do I have to pay Canadian duty? No. Do I have to know the U.S. buyer when I ship it across the border? Yes, I do. Is it easier? To your point, though, Josh, you make a great point. I don't have to know the buyer until I cross, right? Not when I leave. Not when I leave origin. Not until I don't have to know until I cross the northern border.
So okay, because you talked about this model being ridiculous for the very reason that you don't know who it is. Very few companies know by the origin out of Brazil who the end consumer is. But this is a different version of that because you don't need to know until it arrives in Canada, and you can hold it in Canada, right?
It buys you a little more time. You don't need to know until that black arrow crosses into the orange United States, right? So you buy yourself all that time to get the consumer, right?
Yeah.
Which could be, many days, a week or two.
Why is this different than the Tijuana model?
I'm going to tell you the practical use of this. Let's try to keep it really simple for those listening. I'll try to simple it down. Tijuana is like, I have 18 months to identify the consumer. Canada is, I have 2 weeks to identify the consumer, right? And the reason I do Canada instead of the US, it is an alternative to the direct US service, because when you cross by truck, US Customs and everybody's more used to the direct to consumer by northern border truck. So the clearance process is more facilitative and it's easier. And it just works really well. We did a test in 2020 with over 300 containers, and it just works very, very well. We went into Vancouver in our model, but you could do it on the East Coast too.
But what is an example of somebody who would use this? Because yes, you don't need to know by the time when it leaves Brazil, but you still got to figure out between Brazil and the 2 weeks in Canada, you got to know before you get hit with extra duties, right?
Yeah, I really like this Canada almost as a direct U.S. ocean alternative, to be honest.
Okay. But so meaning you should try to you should reduce the delta between when you know your consumer's buying it and when it's ready to be fulfilled. This is the goal.
And it crosses and clears with more powerful streamlined data, in my view.
All right, so let's talk about this. Diving into significant savings for apparel companies as an example. Show us where the rubber meets the road here.
Yeah, so this is a real example, a real life example of a container of women's blouses, and the duty rate was 32%, and the whole container had 24,000 in duty, and we did the Mexico program and shipped it north to consumer as it sold, and it would have been 24,000 in the old model, pay duty, stay in the U.S., and just fulfill out of your fulfillment center in the United States. But the fact that we nearshored it in Mexico and it didn't enter the country until we could identify the consumer, we saved $24,000 for the customer per container.
Wow. I like seeing those zeros on the right. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. That's huge. For those people out there, and I know there's a lot of really cool Brazilian designers that are looking to sell into the US. This is it right here. Save some money. Okay. So again, when you're looking at partners getting into the US, doing your fulfillment, all your basically pick, pack, delivery, everything, and your placement of inventory, what do we need to look for?
If you don't take anything away from all those arrows and all those planes and all those trucks, this is a logistics play, right? Like, this is not just the customs brokerage play where the shipment comes in, I file the entry, I get a release, I deliver it. This is very much a heavy logistics movement. Things are moving around. Large inventories are moving by truck, by boat, sometimes by plane. So managing the transportation is huge. Having a platform that manages the transportation, the customs and fulfillment programs directly in the U.S. or Mexico, where it could be held until sale. Your partner, and we're not the only ones. There are a couple other partners out there, not many in the middle market like us, but who service middle market customers, by the way, right? Who are selling to retail or direct to consumer. So middle market customers, we respect them, we like them, we don't mind putting the time in. Your partner should be able to create your Section 321 entry type 86 program. Not a big fan of bypass because we're not really bypassing anything. And then connect a lot of times when you fulfill out of Mexico, the obviously the seller of the product who sells on a marketplace is going to want a point of sale system for retailers and online sellers, right? So whatever fulfillment center we'll use in Mexico, already has remote capability to connect to BigCommerce or Shopify, or to have the Shopify or BigCommerce or proprietary software pull the order. And you don't want to be in a manual system, right? You want to have the same electronic connectivity and capability that you have in the United States. And then a simplified billing and management of the entire entry process. Simple as that.
And let me just go back to the C for a second, just so we understand what we're talking about. So point of sale, behind that whole integration. So the idea is, if you're selling off of your site in the US, again, Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, Adobe, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, VTEX. What's up, VTEX? Brazil in the house. Whatever it is, when that order gets placed on your site, it should trigger and directly integrate into your fulfillment center, wherever it is. And in this case, Tijuana, for example, or Canada, wherever it is, right? Similarly, if you are using your website as the point of sale integration for your retailers that are buying products on the point of sale brick and mortar, similarly, that trigger has to happen. And of course, it's the way that the choice of who you choose for your inventory management in Mexico through vis-a-vis, let's say, Alba, has to be one that has that integration and that advanced system.
And Josh knows more about point of sale than I do. So he's probably, he can talk about it better.
If anyone wants to get in touch with Vince, obviously there's his email and his LinkedIn, except with me, hello@growbig.org, and there's my WhatsApp as well. But thanks for joining us, talking all things optimizing your inventory management and fulfillment for U.S. sales and essentially U.S. entry with Vince Acapella from Alba Wheels Up. We will see you soon from the GrowBig Initiative. Ciao.
Thanks, everyone.